Boom, we are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here, wherever you may be. And of course, however you may be listening. This is the day after video. I wanted to kind of give my summary and synopsis of how the Iowa Hawkeyes football season went this year. As I pointed to in my post-game video, the Iowa Hawkeyes finished the season 8-4. I was planning on making this video. I always end up doing a kind of year in review type video, whether the Hawkeyes met, failed, or exceeded preseason expectations. I was thinking of doing this in a short, but unfortunately, because I do like putting out the short videos, it's a good way to reach new audiences, and it is what it says, which is short. So, but I just don't think I'd be able to get to hit on enough stuff in the 3 minutes. Maybe I'll put out a more condensed kind of just overview synopsis in the 3 minute. But for now, Hawkeye Insider put out an article that I think is a good synopsis of the season and kind of a good backdrop. And so I'm going to go ahead and read it and just kind of tell you guys what I agree, where I agree, and where I disagree in what they had to say. So let's go ahead and read this article here. Heartbreaking losses throttling Big Ten rivals Minnesota, Nebraska, and Wisconsin, which Iowa absolutely did, except for Iowa State, of course. But as far as the Big Ten goes, they absolutely dominated their rivals. And I made a comment about this, that if you look at the old Big Ten West, Iowa continues to be the top program to emerge out of the Big Ten West tier of teams. And I would even say that was the case, the final, 5, I would go as far as the final 5 years of the, Big Ten West-East alignment, that Iowa on average was the most consistent and top Big Ten West team. Maybe not every single year, but by and large, that was the case. This was the 2025-2026 football season, but I believe how it goes down is that this will be considered the 2025 football season. They always go with the year that has the most, months played in it. It's really only 2026 if you're a team that makes a bowl game. So when it comes to football, so if we go back to 2020, officially the last 5 seasons, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, actually 2021, if we go back to 2021. So the last 6 seasons, let's go last 6 seasons. 2020 was the Koof year. That was a weird year. The stadiums weren't filled. Not every team was always available to play, depending on how many players they had out with Koof. And, I think Iowa's game against Michigan was canceled that year, if I remember correctly. I'm glad the season happened. If you guys remember correctly, I was clamoring for the season to happen. I thought it was ridiculous that they were considering otherwise. And quite frankly, it really hurt the Pac-12 that they didn't have a season that year. But we go back to that year, Iowa went 6-2. They had no non-conference games, as not every conference played. They finished second in the West with a win in the Music City Bowl. Did they play the Music City Bowl? Didn't actually. Missouri decided not to play. Same with Michigan, that final game of the year. And had Iowa played Michigan in that game, because they finished 6-2. I think they actually may have been able to make the Big Ten championship game because if you guys remember that year, not every team played the same amount of games, which was one of the drawbacks to the season, due to some teams, like I said, not being able to play due to players being out with Koof, and the team as a whole making a decision whether or not to play. So I do actually think had Iowa played that game and won that game, they would have actually played in the Big Ten championship game, as they would have had, it's either they would have had a higher win percentage at 7-2 compared to Northwestern, who is 6-1, or they would have had a higher win total at 7-2 in compared to the 6 wins for Northwestern. The following year, Iowa was 10-4, 7-2 in conference. They won the West. They lost in the Citrus Bowl, and they finished 23rd. By the way, in both rankings, the year before they finished 15th and 16th, respectively. And I do think it's actually worth note as well that they won 10 games in 2019. They did finish third in the West, and that was the victory that they had over USC in the Holiday Bowl. Still one of the best teams, in my opinion, of the Kirk Ferentz era to not play in a Big Ten championship game. That, you know, for what it's worth. I don't think it's worth revisiting who made it to the Big Ten championship game that year, but still. 2021, we went over that. 2022, Iowa went 8-5. They were 5-4 in conference. They finished tied for second in the West with a win in the Music City Bowl. The year before, they lost in the Citrus Bowl, I believe, to Mississippi State. Actually lost to Kentucky that year, 20-17, which apparently that win was vacated for Kentucky. So I guess maybe that maybe Iowa actually gets that win. Apparently that game for Kentucky was actually vacated. I wasn't aware of that until now, so I don't know if that loss even counts as a loss for Iowa if the win is vacated. I doubt it would count as a win, as the game was not won. So it's very interesting. I honestly don't have an answer for that. Looked it up. The loss remains. It's only the win that is vacated in the record book as far as Kentucky goes. But as far as the opposing team's record, it remains the same, which I think is a fair thing, considering they didn't earn the victory, even if technically, you know, somehow the other team had an advantage of some sort. And, you know, so it wouldn't be fair to give them the victory. And I also don't think it would be totally fair to remove the loss, since they did actually play in the game. It's kind of weird, you know. I don't think it's a perfect situation. It's probably, the way they view it is, because the other team didn't do anything wrong, the most fair thing is just to keep it the same. But it's weird to think about how it doesn't count as a victory for Kentucky, but it does count as a loss for Iowa. It is kind of weird to think about, but that's what I found. So anyways, that's not what this video is about. But and then in 2023, Iowa went 10-4, another 10-win season, their third 10-win season since the 2019 season. They went 7-2 in conference. They won the Big Ten West with a loss in the Citrus Bowl. Iowa absolutely got smoked by Tennessee, and of course, that really spurned fans being tired of Brian Ferentz. Of course, Iowa got the new athletic director in Beth Gates, aka Beth Goetz, and needing at least some change, albeit not substantial, but at least a change, and not being okay with the son of the head coach being having such a prominent position, especially when he was not producing. And that was really adding to the whole narrative of Iowa being able to beat average to below average competition, but really, really struggling against decent programs, ranked programs like Tennessee. And that's going to be important to note, and I'm going to circle back to that. And then 2024, in Tim Lester's first year, Iowa went 8-5 with a 6-3 record. But of course, the Big Ten West East disappeared. Divisions disappeared, or dividing the Big Ten into two sides disappeared, and this kind of mega conference was created. I'm not sure if the SEC still has that. SEC obviously, I guess, does not. They went to the mega conference as well. So I think that's important to note, because I did say earlier this year that I think it's pretty obvious that from the Big Ten West, Iowa has emerged as the top program from that old alignment, and I think the stats bear that out. Now, obviously Northwestern probably played better than a lot of people realize, but still. So let's continue with the article. But they defeated Minnesota, Nebraska, and Wisconsin by a combined score of 118-19. That is incredible. And a lot of different paths crafted the story of the 2025 Iowa Hawkeyes. By the way, the name of the article, or the title, is not all, and this is by David Eichholt, not all 8-4 seasons are created equal. Hawkeyes showed progress in 2025. And so that's going to be the main thing that I want to comment on as we go on. They'll end the regular season undefeated against unranked opponents, but 0-4 against ranked foes. Iowa was tied or had the lead with under 2 minutes left against Iowa State, Indiana, and Oregon. The Hawkeyes were shut out in the second half against USC. Kirk Ferentz, his staff, and players will not take moral victories. They were close, but not good enough at the right time to knock off those teams. Very true. There's still a lot of lessons to take away from the 12 games. This is a quote. "It doesn't make headlines, I guess. 8 wins don't," Ferentz said. "The game's all about trying to do your best daily. That's all it is. Our guys have been able to do that. You've heard me say it before. It's hard to win. It's hard to win in college, and it's hard to win NFL games. There's a lot of people competing, trying to do the same thing. I'm proud of the consistency." And I agree with that. I mean, at any level, the high-level high school ranks, any level of college onward, it is very hard to win, because there is a level of competitiveness and care and passion that is there that, you can't just win always off of pure talent. There's other aspects to it, especially in the Big Ten. Iowa is one of 4 programs that have won at least 8 games in every season since 2015. The other 3 are Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama, which, that's great company to be in. It's elite company, according to David Eichholt, which is true. Sure, Iowa feels like they should have exceeded the 8 or 9 win mark in a few of those seasons. They were missed opportunities, but also plenty of highs. Rationality and perspective are 2 things that are lacking when heavy emotions come into play. Believing Iowa strives for mediocrity or is an average program lacks the true understanding and national knowledge in the college football landscape. That's a well-said point, and I agree with that. The Hawkeyes offense showed great strides. So let me actually comment on that, okay? I completely and utterly agree with that. Iowa is not an average football program. Are they elite? No, I wouldn't say that. There are levels to this. And when you paint with broad strokes, you're going to get kind of this more simplistic viewpoint and vantage point. Iowa is a good, at times great football program. And I've consistently always said that. And when I did my video after Iowa lost to USC, I gave a very balanced take in my synopsis of where Iowa football is at, what Tim Lester has brought, and where Kirk Ferentz is at. And I said that if you look at these other programs, Penn State, Tennessee a few years ago, Wisconsin, things can get worse. There are levels to this. To me, average is what you saw from Nebraska. Like, that's average football. And there's a world of difference between, even though the record may not indicate it, between Iowa and Nebraska. And if you look at the 2 teams' schedules, obviously Iowa had the tougher schedule in comparison to Nebraska. So it's not a like-for-like comparison. I know when you see an 8-4 record, or 8-5 record, because Iowa has done it so consistently, it may make it seem like it's average, but it's not. Statistically, that record is above average. Is 8-5 always good? No, I wouldn't say that it's good, but it is above average. That's why I always say there's levels to this. And yes, every 8-4 win season, or 8-5 or 9, they're not created equal. Context does matter. This season, the competition that Iowa played, it did make a difference in the evaluation of these of how well or not well that they did this year. I mean, that's just the truth of it. I agree with this more. Like I said, not every 8-4 season is created equal, and I do agree with that. This was one of the better 8-4 seasons. And I know that the Kirk Ferentz haters out there are going to say, "Oh, you're grasping for straws and you're giving too much credence," but I really do believe it. And if you're being fair and truly fair and good faith about this, I think you would admit that too. Rationality and perspective are two things that are lacking when heavy emotions come into play. Believing Iowa's stride, we already read that. The Hawkeye offense showed great strides in year 2 of offensive coordinator Tim Lester. Iowa's depth chart at running back and mobile quarterback helped provide many different looks that some teams weren't ready for. Iowa went from one of the least mobile quarterback rooms to a record-setting running quarterback. Mark Gronowski ended the season with 15 rushing touchdowns, which are the most by an Iowa quarterback in program history. I wasn't even aware of that, but I'm not surprised by it. And again, that does speak volumes, because for the longest time, the Kirk Ferentz haters, for lack of a better term or phrase of calling them, let's just call them the non-Kirk Ferentz believers, the one, especially the ones that definitely want him gone and to look towards a new head coach. Since you could call them unbelievers, doubters, dubious, disbelieving. I hate it when you look it up and the only other words that they use are like, it's not this. So you look at words that mean to not believe. It's literally to not believe. That's what you find, rather than like actual words that are different. But essentially, that's what it is. You guys know what I mean. Which is true. They said for the longest time that one of the reasons they disliked Kirk Ferentz is because Iowa didn't have a mobile quarterback, and Kirk Ferentz would never be open to having a mobile quarterback. And look, they were. And this was a quarterback that wasn't really the best passer. Maybe, and I even admitted this, I over hyped his ability to pass the football, and I still don't think he's a terrible passer, but he's certainly not one of the better passers in the country, or what I would consider an above average. I think he's like literally an average, at times below average passing quarterback. But usually he's consistently average, which is fine. Like that's really all you need. And so for him to have those skills, and Kirk Ferentz allowing for Tim Lester to run his offense the way he did, I think does say a lot. Let's keep reading. The 15 rushing touchdowns are the second most in Big Ten history by a quarterback in the last 30 years, trailing Michigan's Denard Robinson. That's crazy. Gronowski also became Iowa's all-time rushing yards leader among quarterbacks with 491 rush yards. Lester's offense recorded 37 or more points in 5 games this season. They achieved the same feat last season. The punchline surrounding Iowa's offense should slowly begin to fade away. It's a tired, trite, and lazy narrative that is frequently spewed out by attention seekers and a cop-out for people who aren't really paying attention to what's happening. And that's true. I think that's well said. With that being said, Iowa's passing game has to take a significant step forward throughout the next several months. Agreed. The transfer portal is going to open in 5 weeks, and it would be a bit surprising not to see them being aggressive in the portal for some perimeter playmakers. Ferentz and his staff should feel confident about some of the difference makers that are coming into the program next season. Four-star quarterback Trayden Bessinger, which, by the way, I will do a video on Iowa's recruiting class, is one of the best prospects they've gotten in the last decade. Florida native Xavier Stinson should give Iowa another nice piece on the outside, and Brody Schaefer has shown growth throughout his senior year. Iowa is going to try like hell to win 9 games. They're likely headed back to Tampa for the ReliaQuest poll, which should set them up against a good SEC foe. There are several young playmakers that have shown that they can be factors in the near future. Rashad Godfrey Jr. forced a fumble and had extremely impressive open field tackle against a Nebraska tight end on 4th and 1. Redshirt freshman tight end DJ Vanami finished the regular season leading Iowa in receiving yards. His versatility showcased that he could be next in line for tight end U. Iowa is extremely excited about its young linebackers. In year 27, Ferentz's stability has given Iowa a proven product that works. He has owned the Big Ten rivalries in recent history, which is so true. Iowa has dominated since they decided, and I've talked about this many times, since they decided to put an emphasis on winning rivalry games. Since they had so many, they have dominated. There are current middle schoolers and freshmen in high school who have never seen Iowa lose to Nebraska inside Memorial Stadium. Iowa's losing streak against ranked teams has to come to an end next season. It's a looming cloud that is hanging over the program, and it might be more psychological than anything. The approach in those games was much better this season than the past few, and I agree with that. Iowa did play much better in the ranked games this year than they did before. The Hawkeyes are at a crossroads. They have the 27th ranked recruiting class and by 247 Sports with multiple 4-stars, and really they're only 27th, not because of the star rankings, but because their class is kind of smaller. And on 3, which uses a more weighted ranking, which I think is more representative, weighted in terms of everybody across the country and how many commits they have, Iowa is 23rd. Will be aggressive in the portal, and there's a lot of reasons to feel optimistic. This offseason will be a critical one because there's so much potential over the next couple of years for Iowa to make a real move forward. Land a couple of impact transfers, develop a quarterback who's capable of being a dual threat, defeat a couple of ranked teams, and Ferentz might be cooking with some real quality ingredients. It's well said. I agree with virtually everything that was said. Especially on the tight end front. And hopefully Tim Lester becomes a believer with what he saw. Iowa should have Addison Ostrenga return unless he decides to transfer. Iowa has some young pieces that are nice, especially on the perimeter, although obviously they will be using a core group of wide receivers, not the most productive, but still wide receivers that had a ton of experience and were explosive in their own right, especially Caden Weegan, to graduation. But as far as this year goes, would I consider this season a success? No. My expectation was a 9-win season. And I still think, given what I saw and the talent that existed and the development that I saw, that this team should have won 9 games. But was this season a resounding negative? No. Or failure? No. I totally agree with what David Eichholz said, that Iowa took some steps forward. I would temper it a little bit because really the biggest improvement, as he pointed out, was Gronowski and Iowa allowing him to run. It was the first mobile quarterback that really was mobile since maybe Brad Banks. I mean, I know, CJ Beathard ran around a little bit and things like that, but, Gronowski was a legitimate dual threat quarterback. The run game was still solid, which wasn't different from last year. And the pass game really wasn't there a lot. I compared the stats from this year to last year, and they're virtually the same. I think last year Iowa actually had more passing yards than Iowa did this year. So with that said, that is the number one thing that Iowa is going to have to fix, and I'm willing to give it one more year. I'm willing to give Tim Lester one more year to get it back on track. And it's not even necessarily giving Tim Lester one more year. It's just me willing to give Iowa one more year. And if I don't see it, it's going to be hard for me to continue to show this vested interest, because, you know, it's just, I've wanted to see it for so long, and it's been absent for so long. And there's no reason why Iowa in this day and age cannot have a somewhat, at times, competent passing offense, you know, at least having an average to above average passing attack consistently throughout the year, rather than mostly being average, but at times being below average, which is what we've seen in the 2 years of Tim Lester, which is a step up from Brian Ferentz, where it was consistently below average. So, obviously, if Iowa is able to win a 9th game, although the bowl games are not the same as they used to be, that will be good, finishing 9-4. If they are able to finish 9-4, I will be much closer to thinking that this was a successful season. But as things stand now, I would say that it's slightly not a success, but it's also not a failure. You know, Iowa did not completely meet my expectations, but they also didn't completely shatter my expectations in a negative way either. You know, Kamari Moulton, who I think is only a sophomore, finished with 783 rush yards, 4 touchdowns, averaging 5 yards a carry, which is not, you know, elite by any stretch of the imagination, but for such a young guy, you know, he seems like a veteran, and he will be a veteran going into next year. But, you know, he met my expectations. I would say Gronowski running the football exceeded my expectations. You know, especially with the 15 rush touchdowns. Iowa had 26 rushing touchdowns this year, which is pretty good. You know, the emergence of DJ Vanami, as I said, is solid. Sam Phillips ended up being by 1 yard the leading wide receiver, which means that it was successful going out and landing him, and him. Iowa being able to point to him, although he wasn't a world beater by any stretch of the imagination, and saying, look, we went and got him. He had 1 year of eligibility. He came here. He competed. He earned a starting role, and immediately, you know, saw playing time and was our second leading receiver. I think says a lot. You know, Jacob Gill had 260 yards. Reese Vanderzee, most of his production came later in the year. But yeah, you know, there are some good things here. So anyways, guys, that is my analysis a day after Iowa's victory over Nebraska. Listen, guys, it can always be worse. You know, I've been watching some of these videos of Nebraska content creators and them discussing Nebraska losing. How dare I even mimic Iowa lose to Nebraska? When does that ever happen? No, Nebraska losing to Iowa and kind of where they're at, as well as Wisconsin. It could be a lot worse, guys. Like, Iowa's program is in a really healthy spot, and I am willing to give a little bit more time and support to this program. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, share. You guys know the drill. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow. Facts or feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. Love you, Hawk fans. See you guys next time. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.